Yeah, that's what I was hoping. I just saw you Monday, so I know you weren't sick then. So I'm like, I know he didn't come down sick between now and then. Hope he didn't anyway. Yeah, different people heard different things. It's sort of like the gospel accounts, they all heard it differently.
It's good to expect you to be here.
That's right. Michael, can you hit is the remote back there, sir? Thank you. Are we watching a movie on Apple TV or something? Is that a commercial? Well, let me try it this way. Got me now.
Oh my goodness, Mom, if you lost your mind,
Well, it's good to see everybody tonight. Thank you all for coming out and joining us. Appreciate those who may be joining us online as well. Hopefully you can find us here tonight and get on with us, get online with us as we begin our Bible study this evening. We started this Bible study last week as we looked at the names of God. I heard a story about a little girl who was painting a picture in class in elementary school one day. And the teacher was walking around, checking on the kids. And the teacher asked, "What are you painting?" And she looked around and she said, "I'm painting a picture of God." Well, the teacher said, "Well, you know that no one's ever seen God, so no one really knows what he looks like." And so she looked up at the teacher and said, "Well, they will now." And the problem is that none of us really have an understanding of what God looks like because we've never seen God. And so everybody has this different perception of who God is or what he's like. We have in our minds this image of God. Obviously, we have Jesus, who is the visible image of the unseen God. We can see Jesus. We can even see people that portray what Jesus looks like. But really, we don't really have any real photographs of Jesus. We just have drawings and other things, what people think Jesus looks like. People who have had after or near-death experiences, they've tried to portray what they think God looks like or what Jesus looks like. But if we try to create an image of God in our mind, it will be wrong every time. As a matter of fact, God told us from the very beginning, one of his major laws was not to create any image, right? Remember what Exodus 20 verse 4 says? It says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything in heaven above, or there's in the earth beneath, or there's in the water underneath the earth." Why did God put that law in there? Because God knew that if we could come up with this image of who God is or make this image of God and we would create it, then we would begin to worship that versus worshiping who God was. And so God knew that would be the case. And by the way, that was the case and continues to be the case today. So if we're going to understand who God is and what he does and what it means for us, understanding all of that, then we're going to have to, we know that God reveals those truths to us through his name, through his names, his various names. And so as we've been looking at these names, we can understand what they mean and why they matter. That's kind of the whole purpose of our Bible study. And God has a name for every one of our realities. In other words, every person who came to know God on these various levels in the Bible that we're studying God's name as he reveals himself to them, every one of these people learned that knowledge or understanding of that characteristic of God or that name of God by the particular reality they were experiencing at the time. In other words, the scenario, the circumstance they were going through. And so we can look back and kind of see that circumstance or that experience that they had, and we can see how God, as he revealed himself to them, is the same God today, and we can find comfort and find help during those same similar circumstances of our lives. Because so many of the people in the Bible experience things just like you and I experience. And so it's cool to go back and learn how God revealed himself to them, and then how we can apply it to our own lives today. So today I want us to look at the next set of names. We already looked at Elohim and El, the creator God and the strong one. We talked about them, that characteristics of God last week. This week I want us to talk about Jehovah and Adonai. Jehovah and Adonai. Now, remember how most of these names in the Bible became to be understood, right? People were relating to that. Well, there was a guy by the name of Moses, who you all know had pretty incredible life story, right? I mean, from the very beginning, one of those babies who Pharaoh was out, trying to kill them all, and his mama put him in the basket, and he got picked up by one of Pharaoh's servants, daughter's servant, and then took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, I want to take him in and make him one of my children. So basically became a grandson to Pharaoh himself, right? And was raised up in the palace, and then, one day he's out, and by the way, he was raised by his mom and around his sister and all that kind of thing as she was nursing him. And then one day he sees a couple of Egyptians fighting, and y'all know the story. He kind of breaks in there and he tries to break it up, and he ends up killing one of the guards that's kind of trying to hurt one of the Egyptians, and he gets afraid and he runs for his life. He leaves. So he's 40 years old when he leaves Egypt to go out to this well in the middle of a desert, and then ends up helping a lady who was trying to get some water up there, was getting kind of, harassed by some shepherds. And he ends up helping that lady and ends up becoming his wife, and he works for a guy by the name of Jethro for about 40 years. Well, it was during that time of his desert work as a shepherd, that he's out there keeping sheep one day, and he looks over and he sees a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed. Now, I don't know about you, but if you saw that happen in your life, it would probably get your attention. Or at least you would probably think to yourself, what is this that's going on? Sometimes people will come into our neighborhood, like a police will come into the neighborhood, the lights come in, and we'll go look, because we live right by the street, we can see, and we can see the police. We hear the sirens, we look, police coming in. Ambulance comes in, we'll look and see. But if there was about 4 or 5 fire trucks coming in the neighborhood, all lit up and stuff, we would probably get in our car and go out there. That's how nosy we would be. We'd want to go check it out. Somebody's house on fire, we want to go find out who it is, We kind of, people do that kind of thing. If you saw a bush burning and you were a shepherd, it'd be like those fire trucks. You'd go over there and check it out. You want to see what's going on. So he goes over there to check it out, and that's when God calls out his name, and he calls it out twice. Moses, Moses. When God calls your name twice, it's serious, right? He's wanting to really get your attention. He has a knack for doing that. So he calls Moses' name out. He gets Moses over there and he says, take your shoes off, Moses, because you're walking on holy ground, right? Gets over there and he starts talking to him. And he said, I want you to go back into Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Moses is like, hey, wait a minute. I remember what happened last time I was down there. I knew things didn't go too well for me last time I was there. Now you want me to go back? So I want us to pick up the story, because it is in these circumstances that we see this Jehovah explained, or Jehovah revealed to Moses, and it's his sacred name. Jehovah is God's sacred name. Now, let's read it together. Exodus 3:13 through 14. Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Now, interestingly enough, that name, that phrase, I am that I am, that phrase was a sacred phrase to the Hebrews. Okay? Because in Hebrew, it was actually 4 Hebrew consonants with no vowels. And so you could not even pronounce it. It was more of a breath sound, is what Hebrew scholars believed it to be pronounced. If there was a way that you could pronounce it, it was almost as if it sounded like a breath. That's why they believed that God's name was even in the very breath that we breathe, which is pretty incredible when you think about that song I think that there's a song that says something about, in the breath that we breathe. And I forget the name of the song, but I'm messing it up now. But that's what it was. So then eventually, the people added to those consonants, they added vowels, and they came up with the name Yahweh. You ever heard the name Yahweh? That's Hebrew. Well, when you take it into the English, Yahweh is pronounced or interpreted, translated, Jehovah. So when you see Yahweh, that's His sacred name. In the English, it's Jehovah. Now, I'll take it another step, a little bit more interesting in a moment. But it's His sacred name. And that means that it was sacred because it was so sacred at one time that they could not even pronounce it. But eventually, it became known that it was just His name. Now, it's sacred because it's His personal name. It was the name that He gave to Himself. No one else gave this to Him. He literally told Moses. Moses said, what is the name? When the people say, well, who is it that sent you to us? He says, you tell them, I am. That's my name. I am is my name. This is not God, this is not somebody figuring out who God is or calling God by a certain name based upon what God did for them. No, God literally says, my name is I am. That's what He said. He said, my name is Jehovah. It's His personal name. It was a name He used to relate to His people. Remember Elohim? Elohim was God showing off, right? Remember we told him he was the creator God. He created everything in 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested it. He was done. He completed it. Mike dropped it and all, right? He was just showing off. He's the strong one who can do all things. That's God Elohim. That shows us the powerful nature of God. Then when we get to Jehovah says, I'm not just this powerful God who is outside of creation, exists outside of creation, outside of time and space that we talked about last week, but I'm also this personal God that comes right down in here with you, that I want to relate with you now. So Jehovah was His relational name, because remember why He called Himself this I am. He wanted to bring back His people to Him. He wanted His people to come back. They were in bondage. He wanted them to know that He heard their cries and He wanted to deliver them from their bondage. So it's His personal name. It's combined. But interesting, when we see this way back in the creation story, actually Elohim and Jehovah were actually combined. You might not realize it at first, but look in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. Remember we talked about it from Genesis 1:1 to Genesis chapter 2, verse 3. That portion of Scripture, the creation story, all we see about God is God's name, and it's all Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. The plural God, the plurality of God. It is the creator God in three-in-one God who is bringing about this creation. But then when we get to chapter 2, verse 4, notice it says, this is the history of the heavens and the earth, this is from the New King James, when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. You see that? L-O-R-D. If you have a English, I don't know, the King James. You got King James? Yeah? Is your Lord, is it all caps? L-O-R-D. If you ever see all capital, L-O-R-D in the English Bible, a lot of English Standard, King James, a lot of times New King James, you'll see it in there. That is Jehovah. That is Jehovah. When it says God there, that's Elohim. So what it is this Jehovah Elohim. We're talking about the relatable God combined with the all-powerful Creator God. And so it's cool that God even combines His name to show us who He is. He's not just this powerful God, but He's also a personal God. Notice His name is not just sacred because of its personal characteristic, but it's also this Jehovah. is his popular name. It's used by God or to identify God over 9,000 times in the Bible. As I said before, you can often find it in not just in Genesis or Exodus, but a lot of the places in the Old Testament, you will find it capitalized, L-O-R-D. When you see that L-O-R-D, all caps, that is Jehovah. Matter of fact, there is some translations, I think it's the ASV, who just puts Jehovah in there. They just leave out L-O-R-D, the capital, and just put Jehovah in there. And so it is his popular name. When we see the L with the little o and the little r and the little d, like it would normally be written, that's a different name for God. That's the name Adonai. And that's the name we're going to talk about in just a moment. It is not just his personal name and his popular name, but it's also his proprietary name. This name is his name, and it can be used by no one else. No one gave him this name. He said, I am that I am. I am. This is his name. And in this name, we see 5 proprietary statements that are only true about Jehovah. First of all, he is self-sufficient. The I am God, the I am Jehovah, has everything he needs. If we need something, we have to go get it, right? We can't get stuff from ourselves. We usually have to get stuff. Now, you might have a lot of stuff on hand, but if you had to go get that. You can't just produce it on your own. You can't just make it up. You can't just make it happen. We have to go to the store if we need this, or if something breaks down, we have to go get a part. We might be able to use items that we have on hand, but God doesn't need anything. He made everything, what? Out of nothing, right? God doesn't need anything. He has everything he needs within himself. He did not need anything, any kind of materials, raw elements to create this universe or world that as we know it. He didn't need any of that. He existed outside of it, and so he just spoke it into existence. That's because he is self-sufficient. He doesn't need us. But it's super cool that he decided to create us, didn't it? And he decided to invite us into his presence. And here's a great one. Even when we failed him, and we broke his law, and we went away from him, he loved us so much that he would send himself in the person to live on this life and to suffer and to die so that we could be reunited with him. That is a love beyond measure. And it shows us not only of his name being self-sufficient, but also its self-existence. He is who he is. When he said, I am that I am, he was saying, this is me. I am self-existent. I exist outside of the universe. I exist outside of space. I created all this stuff, and I didn't need all this stuff to exist. I exist in eternity. We don't understand that, which brings us to the next point, which is eternal. We don't understand eternity, and we have a hard time grasping it because we're not eternal. We're finite. We don't understand it because all of us go by time, you know. I mean, we'll be, looking and, be close to my bedtime if this preacher don't hurry up and stop. I got to get home, get back in bed, so I can be ready for tomorrow. We got a clock that we live by, a schedule. It's Wednesday. We already got plans for Thursday and Friday and Saturday, Sunday. We got, our schedule next month. We got doctor's appointments and, this is going on and, trips are scheduled and all this kind of stuff. So we kind of live by that. But God isn't defined by time, right? He exists outside of it. Jehovah exists outside of that. Matter of fact, Jehovah has already been to the end. He's already there. He's already at the end. Where the eternal state is, he's already there. And he's way back at the beginning too. Way back before we were ever around, before we even thought, he's way back. He is there. Because he says, I am. He's not, I was or I will be. No, I am. So he says, I am here, but I am also here. And I'm also all the places in the middle. And so he exists in that eternal state. And one day we're going to get to heaven and we're going to understand it. But we don't understand it right now. So what God does is speak to us in His Word in a andromorphic language, meaning it's a language that He speaks on our level to help explain to us things of eternal knowledge. So things of eternal principle and things. This is how God explains it. So sometimes people will say, well, we talk about eternal God. He doesn't change. He doesn't, He's immutable. He's always the same today, yesterday, and forever. He's that kind of eternal being. So what about the times whenever God says He changed His mind, right? Like, remember the people in Nineveh? He wanted to destroy the people, but whenever they repented and turned back, so He changed His mind. He repented and decided not to destroy Nineveh. And so He didn't, right? Although later on He did. Many years later He did. So, but He didn't at the time. He changed His mind. Did that mean God changed? No. God changed because the people changed in the understanding. He changed in the language so that they could understand who He was and the character that He was, because He revealed another characteristic in Himself, His faithfulness to His promise, and also His grace to those people that deserved a death, but they repented from their sin. So the fact is that God is this eternal God, but He's also an approachable God. He used the word I am, meaning He wants to relate to you. He didn't send an angel. He wasn't sending an ambassador. He's not saying, this is going to be somebody that's going to represent me. He said, no, you go and you say, I am sent me. It was the very God of heaven, the same God that was eternal, self-existent, and self-sufficient, is the same God that is approachable to us today because He wants to relate to us. That's why He uses the term Jehovah. This is a great way to witness. If you ever come in contact with somebody who's of the Islamic faith and you're ever talking to them, the Islamic people do not believe that their God, Allah, is approachable. They don't believe that. Because their God He's so separated from them, they could never approach Allah. Matter of fact, the only way an Islamic person could ever get to heaven is if they've done everything they're supposed to do, and they die, and they go to like a place called, basically like a purgatory, and when they stand before God on the day of judgment, their God, Allah, is going to snap His finger, and it's either 50-50. You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. But all this time on earth, there's no way you can know, because you can't have a relationship with Allah. You just have to try to do your best to follow His rules. But we have a relatable God. Because Jesus came to this earth and He became one of us. And it's a great message to show that God became flesh and God came down to experience the things that you and I experience. And that makes our God an approachable God. Because of what Jesus did for us, we can come boldly to the throne of grace and find mercy to help in time of need. Not only is that, finally, He is a self-defined name. He says, I am. He tells us about Himself with this name. He tells us that, hey, I am that one. It's my name, and this is who I am. The Israelites would want to know who He was, and so He gave Moses a name that they could understand. It was a sacred name. But I want you to notice the next name that we're going to talk about tonight, which is Adonai, and that's His sovereign name. If Jehovah is His sacred name, then Adonai is His sovereign name. Now, Elohim shows us God's power. Jehovah is that relationship that God wants. And then Adonai is us positioning ourselves under Jehovah to experience His Elohim power when we have that relationship with Jehovah. See, that's what this is all about. Look at Psalm 97 verse 5. It says, the hills melted like wax at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the Lord of the whole earth. This is Adonai. Adonai is sovereign. He is over the entire universe. There is not one place of creation that Adonai is not in control of. Sometimes we wonder what's going on over in Afghanistan. What's going on over here in this part of the world? What's going on over here in America? What's happening in my house? Hey, you know what? God's sovereign over all of it. Sometimes we wonder, well, what God's greater plan is. I mean, I believe with all my heart, God wanted Joe Biden to be president. Okay? Because I don't think God would have let him become president if it wasn't God's plan. Because God ordains those who are in authority, even in kingships. And there's been times when God has raised up and allowed an evil king to come and even rule over His people, and God has blessed that king for a time and for a season, or allowed that king to have power for a time and for a season, even whenever that king was oppressing his people, so that God could perform His plan and accomplish His will. So I believe God is sovereign over all things and over all will. And this is Adonai at His best. This name is more for us than it is for God, because this is how we relate to God. We want to know God's power. We want to have that relationship through Jehovah, by understanding who Jehovah is. But we can't do that until we understand Adonai. And how we have to do that is we have to recognize Him. Recognizing Him as sovereign. Recognizing Him as Lord and as master of your life. In Isaiah chapter 6, there was Isaiah, he says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of His robe filled the temple. King Uzziah was one of those guys that wasn't a good king. He wasn't a good guy. He wasn't doing the right stuff. But guess what? God had ordained King Uzziah. And what God was showing Isaiah was, listen, there's one guy, this one master, this one Lord over here. He's up to no good, but I'm going to show you a Lord. I'm going to show you a master. I'm going to show you who I am as sovereign Lord Adonai. I'm going to show you who I am right now. You get in the front row seat. And so Isaiah saw the Lord, that's Adonai, sitting upon His throne. Notice it says in verse 2, above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings, and 2 He covered His face, and with 2 He covered His feet, and with 2 He flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Look, that's capital L-O-R-D, right? That is Jehovah. That's who that's talking about, Jehovah. He said, holy, holy, holy is the Jehovah, Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of His glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the voice was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I don't want you to miss this. In verse 1, he saw Adonai. In verse 5, he saw Jehovah. Here's the thing. We won't know Jehovah until we know Him as Adonai. We can't know Him in a personal relationship until we submit to His sovereignty, until we submit in His relationship and position ourselves under His authority. You can't just come to God, well, I'll give you, okay, God, I'll give you my life now. I'll let you have me. You know, no one comes to God that way. You don't come to God and say, okay, God, you can now have me. I'm the greatest gift to Christianity, and now you can use me, Lord. No, that's not. And that's not what Isaiah said either, by the way. If you go on and you read, my life's verse comes from this, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. This transformed Isaiah's life. It transformed his ministry. This was really his calling and really his beginning of his public ministry, and it changed him. Why? Because he may have known who Jehovah was, but now he was really understanding who he was because he understood him as Adonai. When you recognize God as Master, Adonai, then you will experience Him personally as Jehovah. Have you ever watched those TV court shows? You ever watched them? You know, different ones, People's Court, and Judge Judy, and all these. I think they have. There's a ton of them out there now anymore. All these daytime TV shows. You know, you can't go on one of those shows. One of the rules is before you go on the show, you have to agree, if they're going to take your case, that you have to accept whatever the judge says, right? There's no appeal in it. You don't come out on the other side and say, I don't like what the judge says, I'm going to go ahead and appeal that to a higher court. No, it don't work that way. As soon as the judge lowers the hammer, it's done. If it's for you or against you, well, it's over. It's that's the rule. You got to accept it because you signed the line. Well, a lot of people want to come into God's court and they want to say, well, Lord, let me hear your ruling first, and then I'll decide if I want to accept it. You know, that's not God's way, right? God says, you have to accept my ruling first. You have to accept me as sovereign. You have to accept me as Master and Lord. You have to know me as Adonai first. Then we can have that relationship.
That's all the same thing when we say, God, if you'll get me out of this now, I will do something.
That's right. That's right.
God do first.
Yeah, we want God to help us, and then we make these promises, but God says, no, you got to trust me. And then, just believe me. Recognize me for who I am. And then, watch me do what I'm going to do. So we got to recognize Him first. Secondly, we have to rely upon Him. If we're going to trust Him and know Him and understand Him as Adonai, we're going to have to rely upon Him. Well, in Exodus, we go back to chapter 4. Moses is now, further in this conversation with God. He talked to God, and God's telling him, I want you to go back, and I want you to tell Pharaoh to let my people go, and all this story. This is my name, and this is what I'm going to do for you, and I'm going to show you these signs. I'm going to show you these wonders, and they'll believe you. You got my full authority behind you. And then Moses said to Lord, Jehovah, right? Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Now, what did he call the Lord? And Moses said to the Lord, and what word did he use for God? Little o, little r, little d. He used Adonai. When he first started talking to God, as God was speaking to him, he called him Jehovah. Because God said, this is my name. I'm Jehovah. Now, Moses is going to submit to his plan. He's going to go back into Egypt, and he says, Adonai, I need your help. Because I can't talk. I stutter, and I stumble, and I'm not the most eloquent of speech. Adonai, I need you. If you want me to submit to you, I'm going to need you to help me. You know what that is? That's recognizing the Lord and relying upon Him. So the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say. Now, when we see Moses go, y'all know the story, don't seem like he had a problem talking, did he? He looked like he was pretty quick and had Johnny on the spot with all the words when it came to Pharaoh. You know why that was? Because he understood and he recognized God as Adonai. He had a personal relationship with Jehovah, and so therefore he had all the backing of Elohim behind him with the power of God. And so he could go do what God had asked him to do. As he relied upon Him, when we rely upon Adonai as our sovereign God, our Master, then we can know that He has our back. Now, we've all seen these signs. out here on the road, right? I think there's one out here, used to be out here by the blessing box that says, God's got this. Y'all seen those signs? God's got this. Now, in order for us to really to experience God's got this, there's something that we have to do, right? You can't just say, well, God's got this, and I'll just go sit on, someone was saying one time, well, I'm just going to go, I know the Lord's coming back. He's going to come back here soon. And I think we could all agree it's not going to be long, right? We believe the way the world's going, it's looking pretty favorable. The Lord would be returning pretty soon. So one guy said, well, I'm just going to go get me a lawn chair, prop up on my ceiling, up on my rooftop, just sit up there with a glass of tea, point toward the east, and just wait. Wait on Jesus to come back. Well, that's not the approach either. We don't need to just go kick back and look at the eastern sky waiting for the Lord to come back. I don't think that's what Jesus meant when he said, watch and pray, right? That guy thought he meant watch and play. No, he said watch and pray, first of all, and that's not what he meant at all. If we're going to see God has this in our life to take care of circumstances in your life, to come through for you, to help you in your time of need. If we want to see God move in a powerful way like that and have that Elohim experience with God, then we're going to have to get to know Him personally. And thank God we can know Him personally because He revealed Himself as Jehovah. He said, I am that relatable, that approachable God. But the only way we're going to know God personally is if we submit to Adonai. That we recognize Him as such and we humble ourselves. Then when we do that, we watch and we see what God can do. And He's going to do some amazing things in your life. Remember I said something about Isaiah? How God changed his life? Well, not only did Isaiah recognize God as Adonai, but in the end, and he recognized Him as Jehovah, in the end, the Lord said, who can I send? And who will go for us? That's Elohim God. That's the plurality God, right? Who will go for us? And you know what Isaiah said? He said, here am I. Send me. Isaiah surrendered to go that's total reliance upon God. Friends, when we get to that point where we understand God and we position ourselves relationally with Him, that we recognize Him as Adonai, as sovereign God, then we recognize His personal name and who He is, secret God, but that incredible one, we're certainly going to experience His power in our life. I believe it was Isaiah, it was said it was probably Israel's greatest prophet. Not only did he write one of the largest books in the Bible, but he spoke of so many prophetic things and so much God used him to speak to in his ministry in a mighty way. And so therefore, I truly believe it is because he first recognized God as Adonai. He had that relationship with Jehovah, and he experienced in the end the Elohim power of God. Friends, these names are much more than just to know a name or be able to pronounce say a cool word. But it's understanding who He is for you. If you want God's power, you can't have power unless you know God personally. Unless you have a personal relationship with Jesus, with God through Jesus Christ, you're not going to get God's power. God's power won't be in your life. If you've got some stuff in your life where you say, I just need God's power to move in my life, well, you have to have a personal relationship with God. And that comes through knowing Jesus. But the key to that is to submit yourself to Adonai. And when you do, all these other things will fall into place. We're excited. We're just getting into these names of God, and we're going to continue to understand who God is as we go throughout this study. Hope you can join us each week, whether in person or online. And I hope it'll be a blessing to you as we study it together. We're going to go to prayer time now at this time. If you have a prayer request you'd like to share with us, we'll be taking some in-person prayer requests. But you can always leave it on our website or in the comments section, and we'll be praying for your your needs along with the ones that we take here in this room tonight and beyond. Appreciate everybody coming out as well as those who joined us online, and we're going to say goodbye to those who joined us online now. Thank you so much for joining us, and we pray God's blessing upon you, and until we can all meet again, we ask God's blessings in Jesus' name. See you later.